Thank you, Patta sir. Good evening to you all. Welcome you all for today's case discussion. And for today's discussion, I have selected a rare case of an unusual case of interstitial obstruction. Straight away going into the case, this was a lady, 60 years of age. She presented with a classical picture of interstitial obstruction. She had pain abdomen of 2 days and associated with abdominal distension. So whenever someone comes with a interstitial obstruction and abdominal distension, if it is early, we have to think in terms of an ileal obstruction or a colonic obstruction. And this lady also was having vomiting, but that was not the early symptom. Whenever we have a vomiting as a early symptom, we have to think in terms of jejunal obstruction. So vomiting will be more frequent, early onset, as well as bilious in jejunal obstruction. In ileal obstruction, vomiting will be a late symptom and it will be a feculent vomiting. This lady was having something like a feculent vomiting only. And of course, there was constipation and obstipation, the classical tetrad of interstitial obstruction. Her heart rate was 90 per minute. BP was 130 by 86 millimeters of mercury. Respiratory rate was 18 per minute. Oxygen saturation in the room air was 98%. Cardiovascular system and respiratory system were clinically normal. Coming to the abdomen was distended but soft. And there was diffuse mild tenderness. There was no rebound tenderness, no guarding or rigidity. Liver dullness was not obliterated. And there was a healthy scar there, previous surgery, and there is no evidence of any hernia. Her comorbids includes diabetes mellitus as well as hypothyroidism, for which she was on medications. Previous surgical history was a pupil sterilization done at 30 years back and an abdominal hysterectomy done 4 years back. But she recently was having multiple episodes of adhesive colic. Before this particular intestinal obstruction, she was having multiple episodes of adhesive colic, which was treated conservatively. That was the preceding symptoms. Now, this patient actually was under the follow-up of the gynecologist because the hysterectomy was done 4 years back. And we all know that our patients, whenever you do a surgery, they attribute everything to that surgery only. So obviously, she was repeatedly going to the gynecologist. And all the previous visits were just an adhesive colic, but this time she went with an interstitial obstruction. So probably the gynecologist took a surgeon's opinion as well as, and the patient was sent for a CT scan. CT was done outside. That hospital was not having a CT facility. It was done at one of the biggest centers of Chennai. And I think I'll read some of the findings for you, and the panelists can also read new findings or interpret findings in a different way. Obviously, there is evidence of gross interstitial obstruction because you can see the dilated loops of small bowel there. And the cecum seems to be collapsed, which means that you have ruled out a colonic obstruction. And just for the sake of the postgraduates, this is a classical sign, what is called string of pearls sign, where you have a bowel loop that is dilated and filled with full of fluid, and air gets absorbed and the remnant air gets collected at the superior aspect of the bowel. And if you see the lower border of this air shadow, it will have multiple meniscus signs. So this particular appearance is very classical of interstitial obstruction. It is a string of pearls sign that was positive in this patient. And some more cuts, you can see the bowel loops are grossly dilated. And when you come to the pelvis, the uterus is absent because of the hysterectomy. And there is a loop of bowel in the pelvis, most probably an ileal loop, which is having an annular calcified-like lesion within the lumen. And that was probably the place of transition zone between the dilated loops and the collapsed segment. There is no free fluid, and there is no evidence of any stricture or any, except for this calcified annular area, there was nothing, and dilated bowel loops, nothing was there. Now, these are the coronal sections for you. You can see the annular radiopaque calcified lesions in the distal ileal loops with grossly distended bowel. And before I actually throw open for the panelists to discuss, the radiologist in the scan center has given a report. He reported this as a case of small bowel obstruction. Most probably the level of obstruction was at the distal ileum. And the cause of obstruction, he mentioned this as an enterolith. And enteroliths are rare entities, stones within the small intestine. And actually, there are, of course, there are a lot of case reports that has been published about enteroliths, and this is just for your. There are so many case reports talking about enteroliths. Interestingly, when I searched the enterolith in the Google, it seems to be a very common disease in the horses, because horses is one animal which manifests with the enteroliths. That's what I got the information. But that was the radiologist's opinion. It's up to us to accept it or refute it. And I just want to open the case for discussion amongst the panelists. What is their initial thought process? Do you agree with the diagnosis of enterolith or any other diagnosis?
Dr. Shankar, I don't think it's an enterolith.
Okay, sir.
There are two separate segments adjacent to each other, or maybe the same segment, little space in between, which seems to have a irregular calcification of the inner layer of the intestine.
Okay.
So, and there also appears to be one or two areas where there is some kind of a streak, as if the calcification of the vessel.
Okay.
So I think this is one of those idiopathic calcification of the intestines.
Okay, sir.
Intestinal wall. I mean, apparently, I had a case yesterday. 4 years post people, he had abdominal pain, so I got a CT scan done to see what is wrong. Then I found there is some area which my radiologist said is a staple line. I said there is no JJ with staple line, and I went into the OT notes. We never used staple anywhere. So then I went and searched the literature, and it looked like calcification of the vessels of the small intestine, and sometimes apparently can go into the small intestine. So suddenly the case crops up.
Okay, sir. Okay. So you are telling phlebolith of the mesenteric vessels?
No. Calcification, of the vessel, artery.
Arterial.
And it also includes the varying portions of the wall.
Okay, bowel wall calcification. That's very unusual, sir. Very unusual.
Very unusual, but from you, that's what I expect.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Anand?
I have not seen a case. I have heard, but I have not seen a case.
Okay.
What was the surgery, Dr. Shankar?
Abdominal hysterectomy, madam. 4 years back. 30 years back, pupil sterilization.
Abdominal pain is since 4 years?
Pardon, madam?
Recurrent abdominal pain is for how long?
This is for last 1 year only, madam. Or 1 to 2 years, she was having some adhesive colic.
And hysterectomy was uneventful.
Yes, madam.
To me, it looks like a foreign body.
Foreign body, madam. Okay.
Gautam?
Sir, my first possibility will be in phytobezoar at the site of adhesive obstruction, because it's an ileal loop in the pelvis. Post-operatively, there might have been adhesion which is causing an obstruction, and the stagnant bowel is causing a phytobezoar there, which can have this calcification. The second possibility, as Jayanti madam said, it can be an gauze which is left behind, which can migrate, but that is unlikely given the lack of inflammatory signs surrounding it.
Okay.
The foreign body can get internalized, but not without any kind of gross inflammatory signs surrounding the bowel.
Okay. So your first diagnosis is a phytobezoar.
Yes.
Phytobezoar. Okay. But phytobezoar usually occurs in a patient who has already undergone a gastric surgery. We know that, and it's more common in old age. Of course, she's 60 years, and those predisposing factors are not there.
Yes, sir. But I think she has an adhesive obstruction. So there is one cause of stagnation that can occur. And if at all it occurs in the small intestine, it will be at 60 centimeters proximal to IC junction, the narrowest part. So again, that fits in with this patient. That's why I felt more look like phytobezoar.
Okay. What, sir?
See, I go with the Gautam's diagnosis of one is that it's a very circular and quite a lengthy image, or rather radiological finding which is found, and it likely to be some sort of intraluminal content with an outer layering of calcification. And also, if you see that there's some material inside it, some solid material which is blocking the whole thing. So obviously, if it is only a circular calcification of the wall of the bowel, why should there be some material inside? There's a lumen is pretty good actually, it's a pipe-like thing.
Okay.
And second, is a different possibility is because of prior surgery, it could be a gauze or a pad which sort of got into the bowel and is looking like that. Is one of the two is my option.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Anybody else from the audience would like to comment on this very unusual cause of small bowel obstruction?
Somebody has mentioned fallope ring, abdominal cocks, calcified worm.
Dr. Ravichandran is there. Just come up, sir.
Calcified worm, abdominal cocks, and fallope ring. These are all some of the comments in the chat box. Now, there is another bezoar called lactobezor, but that occurs in the pediatric population, where but it occurs in the stomach. You have a solidified milk products which gets calcified, but that doesn't occur in the small intestine. So we have shortlisted some of the differential diagnoses, and I just want to show you one more representative image, an enlarged image. Now you can revise, or
it looks like a sponge.
It looks like a sponge. Okay. Bhaskaran sir?
Maybe some chronic stricture with a whole lot of thing collecting. Maybe she's on calcium or something. So it's all accumulated there. What they call a colonization of the small intestine, which happens with the long-standing strictures.
Okay. Gautam?
Again, same two possibilities.
Okay.
You can have same two.
So same two possibilities, phytobezor as well as sponge. Now, how to differentiate? Suppose we have these two. Is there any investigation we can do it to differentiate?
Sir, if I'm not wrong, generally if we find an foreign body, generally they have air mottling which is present, and they have a fluid that is supposed to be classical in radiology, and this has to have come from outside. So that should have been some amount of mesenteric reaction or at the surrounding the bowel into which it has fistulized.
Okay.
In both the things, and it's generally it causes such an intense reaction. We have clumping of bowel loops also. See, in both the scenarios, the bowel loop actually is quite free. It appears as though that there is not any inflammation extra neural.
Yeah,
so if I think any of those are present, I will suspect gossipy wounds.
No, that we will not be the peri-intestinal adhesions unless you do an enterography. You may not be able to appreciate the subtle signs of adhesions, kinking, those things. Unless you do a dedicated enterography, you will not be able to appreciate that.
See, Shankar, one first foremost thing is an intraluminal whatever,
okay.
And it's occupying considerable length of the intestine. And if you had to think in terms of wall calcification, if you see some infolding in that something is folded inside, if it's a uniform wall calcification, it cannot fold like that. The folding thing could be very much of a textile or something of that nature.
Yeah. Actually, when this patient was referred to our hospital, when I saw the patient in the casualty and the CT scan, I told my postgraduate, this is nothing but an abdominal pad. That was my diagnosis. But we have to confirm it. How to confirm it? That's the question. We can always we'll operate this patient. That's a different story. But can we do anything to confirm it?
Dr. Shankar, we have plain X-ray abdomen.
Excellent, madam. That's what I was expecting that only, and so we did. We did a plain X-ray abdomen. Sometimes CT is over investigating and confusing us. We did a X-ray abdomen, and
I mean, it's a very reverse retrograde approach.
yeah. No, sometimes basic things are we cannot forget the plain X-ray abdomen because that beautifully shows the radio opaque line. But still, it could still the radiologist have given a diagnosis of enterolith. But this line, this picture is more suggestive of an abdominal sponge. Any comments, sir?
Kanan?
Yeah, now it looks like some gauze or pad eroding into the bowel.
Okay. Now the question is, you have a patient with intestinal obstruction and you have a CT reported by a radiologist which says enterolith, and we have an alternative diagnosis in the form of a pad producing an obstruction. It has migrated into the intestine. So now, how to do a preoperative counseling for this patient?
You should not counsel. You should say that there is an obstruction.
Okay, sir.
You should never let down our colleagues.
No, that's okay. But my point is, already the CT films are there. We are not letting down anyone. The CT films are there, and the interpretation of CT films is subjected to variations. Some of the people might straight away say that this is only a pad, nothing else. So in that case, suppose we are not going to tell anything to the patient, then you become a part of the story. That's what I'm worried.
No, your radiologist has helped you. No, he has given a diagnosis of enterolith. Based on that, you operate. What is there?
Okay, sir. Okay.
You are protected now.
Okay.
No, but at the end, supposing you do find it to be a glossopoma, you let it come out with the true diagnosis. So
No, that we need not show.
No, I think you need to.
Kanan is not that simple.
No.
Okay,
Dr. Shankar, I'll tell. I would think
Yes, sir.
possibly it's a leftover gauze piece or sponge or something, and it might have eroded in. But we still will have to keep our options open and then let you know.
Okay. Okay. Gautam?
Sir, explore with the information that it is intestinal obstruction. Then we'll have to go through this.
Gautam, I disagree with you. I think we have to talk about the possibility because I'll tell you about my experiences with foreign bodies a little later in the discussion. Then in what all sorts of trouble one can get into. You can say it looks like a foreign body, it could be possible. When they ask, do you think, sir, it is come to that surgery, this, we do not know. I mean, that part we don't know. This is a possibility because once it comes out to be a sponge, then we'll in a dilemma as to what to do. That time, even if the patient is slightly mentally prepared, then it's okay. Now it will be a shock. Yeah, Shankar.
No. My one point is clear, sir. We can preoperatively, you can always tell that there is an interstitial obstruction. There is no need to tell anything preoperatively, and we'll just there is not even to tell about a suspected pad. There is no need to tell preoperatively, but intraoperatively, if you find, then it becomes a problem.
Yes.
Why I'm telling is it's always it's okay to help the surgeon because this error can occur to anyone. But at the same time, we should not get in the crossfire. That's very important. That also, I just because sometimes under the act of doing something, you get into the part of because the CT can be reported by somebody else. It can go for a second opinion, third opinion, and if they are very sure about the diagnosis, then it becomes a big problem, and you are part of the thing. So it's completely one thing to help support a fellow surgeon. But it's completely another thing. You also get caught into that. That's a very important thing. So preoperatively, there is no need to counsel extensively. We can always do it after the surgery. Any more opinion on this particular point, or we'll go to the things?
Gautam, anything in the chat box? There's so many comments look like. Gautam?
medico-legal. That's what many of them are discussing about medico-legal, but you do comment that we can go ahead with surgery before disclosing the complete details to the patient.
Yeah. Okay.
The problem will start post-operatively if it turns out to be bad.
That's correct. Okay.
Shankar,
Yes, madam.
this pad or whatever was left behind, would the patient have had any complications post-operatively? Fever
Actually,
or
yes.
any other history that we have missed on?
No, basically there are different types of presentation of a retained foreign body, madam. In fact, I'll go through the literature at the end of it, where the patient can manifest with the symptoms anywhere from immediate post-operative period to as late as 28 years. There is a case report where at the end of 28 years, they have found a retained foreign body. So it can have a variety of presentation, depends upon what kind of pathological or inflammatory reaction this pad is eliciting. So that's what will determine. I'm going to talk about a few slides about that.
Is this abdominal hysterectomy or was it transvaginal?
It was not. It was an abdominal hysterectomy, and definitely this patient was having some kind of vague, persistent pain abdomen.
Okay.
In the post-operative, probably after 2 months after the surgery, but it was only mild in nature. We always say that it could be early adhesions. Then if the patient repeatedly comes, we always try to rule out an adhesive obstruction. But there are patients who present basically with an adhesive colic without frank obstruction. So this lady actually has come with a frank obstruction now only. But she was having some symptoms all through the 4 years. Though in a mild manner. That was the symptomatology of the patient.
No plain X-ray ahead of this. We have
no plain X-ray. This was done at this point of time. Okay. So we took up the case for surgery, and with a small mini laparotomy, the loops are delivered, and you can see a loop of intestine there. And when we palpated the intestine, it was looking as if you palpate a loaded colon. Like fecal impaction. So there is some intraluminal a cast-like thing which has changed the contour of the intestine in a fixed manner.
So there is absolutely no signs of inflammation outside adhesions, nothing.
No, this is the distal ileal loop, close to the proximal to the ileocecal junction. But the proximal, when we did the surgery, what happened was the proximal, when we traced the bowel, the proximal jejunum loops are forming severe adhesions. We didn't touch the adhesions. Because it was forming dense adhesions. So we could, but the place where this is producing obstruction is reasonably
clean,
very clean. But definitely the proximal jejunal loops are forming severe adhesions. We didn't make any attempt to dissect that because we know that was not the cause of obstruction. So that's the loop for you. And actually, when we palpated, we are able to palpate. I just got some animation for you. This was a mass that was palpable, and there are two options. One is to do enterotomy and try to remove it, but it is so impacted. We thought that we'll be contaminating the peritoneal cavity, so we resected this. And when we opened that, that was the structure, which resembles the cast that was shown in the animation. And I'll just show you the cut open specimen for you. So when we are cutting open the bowel, something like a feculoma is coming out. And that finally pops out. So that's the thing. And we try to open that mass. It is actually an abdominal pad that has migrated somewhere in the jejunum. And it has made a very clean entry into the intestine without contaminating the peritoneal cavity. Actually, pad can do that. There are many instances reported where pad can make an entry into the intestine without producing any perforation or peritonitis. And that was the pad that was removed, and that's the pad which was removed, and that's the intestine of the pad. So this is basically a retained pad which has migrated into the intestine. Actually, I have my experience of this kind of situation was actually 3 cases. One is this one, where I was the primary operating surgeon. There were other 2 cases where I was called to help the surgeon. In one case, it was in the immediate post-operative period. In a matter of 2 or 3 months, patient was having some persistent fever, and they were trying to find out the cause. And somebody did a sigmoidoscopy where they were able to see a pad jutting into the sigmoid colon. So it was picked up like that. And I heard about one more case from our chief. He was narrating about the same, like a pad migrating into the colon. So you people can share your experience of this particular complication of an abdominal pad.
Shankar, I had many experiences with sponge inside the intestine or the abdomen, and the first one of the early ones was while I was working in Tirupati, a 19-year-old girl who had surgery for novariances by a local big-time surgeon actually. And then I opened, the pad came out. I knew the surgeon by name. I phoned him. He immediately came into the theater, looked up his, this sponge is not mine. I never use such sponges. Okay. His words. And that was one story. Another very important story is one lady was flown in while I was working in a very big corporate hospital, the biggest of all. And one lady was flown in from Mumbai, one Tamil-speaking lady, and she's very sick. She had a superior mesenteric artery issues, and she underwent bowel resection for gangrene, and then I think the wound leaked or whatever. Then these surgeons went in again and did something to the stoma, and then she was having severe pain, fever, and she was in some sort of organ failure when she came in. Then we got a CT done and the CT person said in our hospital, no, it looks like one big contained feces in the abdomen. He never mentioned a foreign body. We took up and we saw a big sponge, and we had to revise all that, and patient was on pressors. Then the dilemma came as to whether to reveal or not to reveal to the patient's party. So then I called up the Director of Medical Services, and the Director of Medical Services called the chairman of the institution, who was in Delhi branch that time. The chairman asked, is the patient likely to survive? Is she very sick? Then I said yes. Then reveal. Then I called them. I showed the sponge and said, this has happened, and this is the cause for her problems. But she already has some arterial issue and this and that. That has become a big case. I had at least 10 summons from Mumbai court. I never went actually. And that surgeon is a young surgeon who's done it. He called me up. Okay. I think the ladies called him. He called me up and said, he had a child born just a week earlier. Okay. Oh, is it? Did you find a sponge? Oh my God. Sorry, sir, you should do something about it. Just, my career and all that. I said, because I discussed with our management, and because the patient is sick, this is what I had to reveal. So, but we kept what happened? Then it ran for a few years. Then again, somewhere there, from there, the court, the people came, it says this sponge is not from here. There's no proof that sponge is from here and all. But eventually I understand there's an out-of-court settlement, and I never went to the Mumbai court. Okay. There are a few more cases. Actually, one of them is one nurse's mother who had from a neighboring state, who got operated by in the hospital where the nurse is working, maybe free of cost or whatever. So it didn't make much of an issue. But one issue was again, one of the same hospital where I was working, one of the gynecologists did a hysterectomy, a sponge was left behind, and patient came with abdominal distension and all that. Then we took a CT, and my associate was reading the CT, so the patient's husband came and said, "What is it?" No, it's nothing. No, please tell me. She said, "It looks like a sponge." The concerned gynecologist gave such a dressing down to my associate. My associate started crying. It's just so bad, actually. How dare you do that, this, that, and that. Anyway, she has later spoke to the patient and sort of adjusted and all that, but we removed it. Of course, this, as Gautam says, no, this had multiple pus pockets, this, that, and the other. We had to do a stoma. Then after that, when we closed the stoma, there was a ventral hernia, but that was repaired. But the gynecologist had a very good equation with the patient, so they didn't cause, or whether they had any understanding, I do not know. So this particular condition of gossypioma involves a lot of stress to the surgeon who removes the sponge, actually. You not believe, when I was in All India Institute, I went to Gangaram for 1 month training in laparoscopy by Dr. Chaubey in Chaubey's unit, because in our unit we are not doing laparoscopy that time. The day I was there was one front page Hindustan Time picture of a surgeon who was about 5-6 houses away from Gangaram with a sponge like this, and a front page photo with his mask down, saying this was found in a woman's abdomen, and that some gynecologist's clinic was sort of bashed up by the relatives.
Okay.
These are all, sponges do a lot of damage.
So, any case where you have found this intraluminal migration, sir?
Yeah. I think at least 2 cases where it's completely inside and there's no sign that it is entered anywhere.
That's correct. Okay.
No sign.
It made a clean entry. Yeah.
Yes, Kanan.
Yeah, I can write a small book with my experience.
Together we'll write.
Really, I have so much experience, but I'll just give 2 examples of how this can burrow into this thing. When I was in Stanley, one senior surgeon who used to operate in his native place, every month he'll go to his native place and do surgery and get my opinion. So one day he said, "Kannan, I did cholecystectomy, those days open cholecystectomy, 6 months back, Kannan. The patient used to come with recurrent pain abdomen. This time he came with this thing, material covered in a newspaper. What was inside, sir? It was a pad. He passed out through the motion."
Okay.
That's pretty early.
It has been.
He was very innocent, Then I said, "Sir, where is your deity, sir? Your family deity, sir?" "Why, Kannan? First you go, you burn this material, sir. Then you go and pray to your God, because patient is given to you, not to somebody else."
Yeah.
So it can burrow and come out to the via naturalis. That is number 1. Number 2, my Pondicherry connection, Pata. One lady underwent cesarean.
Pondicherry lady connection.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Pondicherry GH cesarean was done. Then the pad was left inside, and a patient went to her native place, Dindivanam. After 3 months of persistent discharge, a local doctor took a CT scan which showed a pad in the abdomen. So she came to Chennai for surgery with a gynecologist, and she called me for this help. We've opened the pad had burrowed into the jejunum as well as into the sigmoid colon. So I had to resect that portion of the sigmoid, jejunum and anastomosis, and the colostomy was done for the sigmoid perforation. That gynecology got frightened and gave it to the patient. Patient went to Sun TV. It was flashed in Sun TV. Sun TV fellows wanted my interview. I said, "No, I didn't operate this patient. I only helped." Then Pondicherry police, there was someone from Pondicherry police. So I had to go to Pondicherry 2 or 3 times and go to the court also. And surprisingly, the medical superintendent was the husband of that chief of gynecology. He argued in the case.
Okay.
And they won the case. They proved there was no foreign body.
Okay.
In spite of all the evidence.
Good.
No, I'm interested to know, in all these cases, did you had a preoperative CT scan or an X-ray which was showing some findings, sir?
Most of the time.
No, if you have just an X-ray abdomen and some or something like that, it's fine. Fluid level interstitial obstruction, but when things are very obvious on a CT scan and X-ray, that's what complicate the matters.
Yeah, I think in almost all the cases, CT scans are done actually. And actually, the gossypobioma is very easily made out on CT.
Yeah.
It's very classic.
No, only thing is, if you have to help the surgeon means, I mean, the CT has to be, you can always have the CT with yourself, and you can always refer the patient, or you can do the necessary surgery and cure the patient of it.
No, I think you are running a risk, Dr. Shankar.
Yes, sir.
It is always better, like if you see it on CT or if you suspect, it is better to say, because eventually the blame should not come on you.
That's correct.
Person
Yeah.
put a swab and he's putting it on us. The other hospital says,
Yeah.
there is no way to prove that the swab is.
No, Bhaskaran, the Mumbai, the court, those people, the lawyer said, these people planted a sponge and said the sponge is cause for all this.
Exactly. See, I had one similar case. It almost came back to us like this. So I told the patient, this is the situation. Our radiology report was gossypobioma and it was different. So I told the patient. Anyway, how they settled it is not my headache.
I mean,
But it's better, I want them. This looks like a sponge, and whatever you want to do, you go ahead. If you want us to do surgery, we'll go ahead. But this is our view. So that is how I think it's better you safeguard yourself and your hospital from such cases.
that's what Shankar, I say that if you see on CT, better sort of sensitize the patient to a possibility.
Okay.
Because the
To
patient
avoid-
has to go back to our own surgeon.
Yeah.
Sort it
Then-
out. Yeah.
Then,
Actually, in this particular patient, what I did was I showed the pad to the, after the surgery, I showed the pad to the attenders, and I explained that this was the cause of it, and they were showing some emotion and commotion. I told just keep quiet. Right now, the patient has to recover from the surgery, and she'll be cured of her symptoms. I just reassured that her chronic pain is gone. That's what we are more important, and I just told that. No more discussion about this, but I revealed. And then what happened was I just my discharge summary carried a diagnosis of gossypobioma, which is a technical term. So I didn't, and only the operative notes will mention details, but there was nothing very glaring in the something like a headlines that was not made. It was just given as a diagnosis of gossypobioma, and obviously this patient contacted the gynecologist. In one of the Chennai hospital, and the gynecologist called, I think she was a senior gynecologist. She called me and she told, doctor, why did you reveal this to the attenders? I told, madam, patient has a CT scan. Patient is having an X-ray. Everything is obvious. So if you have not done a CT scan or if you have not done a X-ray, then there is a way out. But after doing everything, then I'll be at a problem. So like that I told, and I just explained the situation politely. And apparently, as Patasar was telling, they settled the patient for the expenditure that she has incurred because of additional surgery. And the patients are also nice people, so they didn't exploit the situation. So I think the moral of the story is, instead of pushing everything under the carpet, better to talk it out and get it clean. That's better, because under the disguise of protecting someone, you should not get into a problem.
And also, I would personally think we should not hand over the thing to the patient. So you give any reason. These are all infected material. It cannot come out of the theater, etc., etc.
Yeah,
That's it into the bin. So no photos, nothing.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that you are never asked also, no? He said, did you take a photo, etc.? He said, our hospital policy is it goes straight away, either for histopathology or into the dustbin.
Yeah, but definitely this needs to be discussed because the incidence is literature says around 0.05%, but you'll never know the exact incidence because most of the cases are underreported or not reported because of the medico-legal implications. As far as medico-legal implication is concerned, it will be an open and shut case. So we have to be very careful about this. And as I told you, it has occurred as late as 28 years post-operatively. And as madam was asking what could be the cause, there are two types of reactions that can happen because of a foreign body. One is an exudative reaction, which basically they will present like an intra-abdominal abscess. This occurs in the immediate post-operative period. So your patient will have a spiking temperature, then you will do a imaging and you can find out a collection with, you can pick up the classical appearance of the radiopaque markers there, the wavy sign. Whereas in some patients, it produces only a fibrotic reaction. There is no exudative, only a fibrotic reaction. Those are all the cases where they migrate into the lumen of the intestine. So these are all the two mechanisms by which the retained foreign body can manifest itself. And a slide about what are the predisposing factors where a sponge can be retained. It's very important. We have to know this. Predisposing factors includes emergency surgeries. When there is an uncontrolled bleed where you are going to use multiple swabs and in a very rapid period of time. And whenever there is an intraoperative change of plan of the expected procedure, and whenever there is an instance of change of teams, especially the staff nurse, it has to be handed over properly. Otherwise, the counts can go wrong. And whenever multiple teams are involved, also there is a chance of a count problem. And when you're operating on a same patient on multiple cavities, say like a thoracotomy plus a laparotomy, you have to be careful. And odd time, prolonged surgery, team fatigue, all these things matters. And body habitus of the patient also matters because it's a high BMI patients, you can easily, a pad can slip into and between the bowels, you can easily miss it. Now, how to prevent? I always insist on the concept of counting twice. And counting twice occurs at multiple levels. Number one, when somebody is packing the pad, it has to be a double counting. When you're opening the pack, it has to be a double counting. And when you're closing the abdomen, it has to be a double counting. So all these levels, you have to do a double count. And I insist on one particular point where you have to do a count before closure of the rectus sheath and after closure of rectus sheath, you have to do a count. Because I have had one instance where we re-explored the patient in the first post-operative for some reason. And when I was not the operating surgeon the previous day, when I opened the stitches, a beautiful pad was spread across the below the linea alba. So what we usually do is we used to tuck in a pad to prevent the bowel coming up, and we always leave the tail of the pad outside. But on that particular occasion, all the four corners was nicely tucked in, and the staff nurse will always count the pads outside as well as they will take into count this also. The last pad will be, they'll count this. But it's very much possible that that pad can remain there. So I always tell my people to do a count after the rectus sheath has been closed. This is after this particular incident, I came to this particular conclusion. And it has to be counted by two people. So it should not be by one person. It should be both the scrub nurse as well as the circulating nurse should do the counting, and it has to be validated by the surgeon.
Shankar, if you permit me.
Yes, sir.
For a minute. Actually, when that incident happened in Gangaram, the chief was saying that all the sponges in that hospital, there's a 10 paise coin stitched into it. A 10 paise coin. Okay. For ready recognition on a scan. Now, actually, this sort of a sponge left over on 2 occasions when I was working in Kerala. See, when we convert lap chole for bleeding to open chole, that's when these things can happen. On 2 occasions, we opened it and sort of controlled it, and then I was in the recreation room where all the surgeons will be playing cards and chit-chatting. One nurse is standing outside and restless and crying. Then she sort of called me. Then I said, "What happened?" So there's a sponge inside. The patient has come to the recovery. Luckily, patient is not completely conscious, so immediately the patient is taken in and then intubated. If that is recognized immediately, we will not let anything to the patient know that this thing happened. So these things happen especially when you try to go through a smaller incision, when you convert and put sponges to retract. These things can happen.
And another thing is, as you correctly told, when you sometimes during open cholecystectomy, we might keep two pads or 3 pads behind the liver to bring down the liver. Sometimes we keep pads behind the spleen during a gastric mobilization. So we have to make sure that all these are removed at the end of the surgery, because these are all areas where pad can be just missed. If the staff nurse is not a trained one or a very sincere one, there can be a problem. And we always have to use a radiopaque marker tagged pads, because at least if there is a count is a problem, there are many occasions where the staff nurse will not allow you to close if the count is not correct. And obviously you will make after doing a major surgery, it will be very irritating to once again explore the various quadrants of the abdomen. But you have to do it. And despite everything, sometimes you will not have a answer. So then you can use a intraoperative C-arm to make sure that that's why you have to use a radiopaque marker tagged pads. Of course, all these things, all the 4 points are subjective. Actually, I read a recent article of a concept called, because despite all the checklist and all the adequate precautions, still retained sponge happens. It happens once in a while. So how best to avoid is, there's a suggestion that all the pads should be barcoded, and when the patient is wheeled out of the theater, you can just screen the patients. That's also has been recommended. But it's very difficult to practice, and the cost factor will be there.
One more advice. Yes, whenever the OT nurse opens the pack, always ask them to check before giving to the, because recently we had a problem. That pack had only 5 pads. Okay. So after everything, one pad is missing. So we didn't know. I am very sure that there was no pad. Luckily, we had a C-arm, so we screened.
Okay.
So the pack should be checked before giving. Immediately after opening the pack, you should count the number of pads.
Okay, that's correct, sir. It has to be done multiple levels. The checking should be done.
Yeah, and another thing, most of the pads I have seen in my experience are in the emergency LSCS procedures, because it is an emergency. The anesthetist wants the gynecologist in a hurry. That is the reason why they leave the pads in many of the LSCS procedures. I am told nowadays they are given only single pad. They are supposed to use only that single pad during LSCS. I don't know. I'm not sure. But if it is like that, definitely they will not leave a pad inside.
Okay. Yeah.
Dr. Shankar,
Yes, sir.
Count discrepancy is not uncommon.
Yes, sure.
Especially when sisters change. After the procedure, you are told once is missing. Then you make an effort, search for it, and you don't find. My personal thing is, I documented the operation notes. At the end of the procedure, there was discrepancy in the count pad, abdomen was explored, and there is nothing left.
Yes, sir.
Now, how does that help anyone?
So, supposing eventually there is a sponge left, that means you made an attempt. You are told
You are accountable.
that's negligence. You made an attempt.
Still you are
Okay.
accountable.
Shankar.
I don't know. That's
Yes, sir.
Sir, Rajan, sir,
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
Shankar,
Yes, sir.
I have encountered one situation in a government hospital where I was called as a duty doctor. I was called to a gynecologist area for the patient is very pale and there is a fall in BP and other things. So I, along with my colleague, went there to the gynecological hospital, where we need to explore, because we thought that it is patient is anemic and pale. Okay. What I assumed initially was there was a bleeding inside, and that is the reason why I was called.
Okay.
But later, when we went there, thinking that it is an intra-abdominal bleed, then we did a laparotomy there in their hospital itself.
Okay.
To our surprise, we found a pad inside that.
Okay.
So I'm really surprised to see that, because it has not gone for a shock-like syndrome, but nevertheless, the pad causing this kind of situation, presentation.
Okay.
So what I did at the time, it is only to save these our doctors. What we did, we knew that when we did the laparotomy, we knew that the pad is inside.
Okay.
So immediately, hurriedly, we asked the staff nurses to give the pad. So immediately we plugged a lot of pad inside, and without probably proper count, it was probably done intentionally, not to miss it out, but to just to say that we need to take up the pad. I cannot take it a single pad out. It is there to show to people.
Okay. Okay.
So we put another 2 pads inside, and then I took it outside.
Okay.
So at the end,
This-
at the end,
the sisters were not confused later on. There's one pad extra.
no.
So they didn't count properly.
No. What happened? Then later they might they came to know, but that is different situation. But it was not revealed. I just made that
Okay.
mechanism in a particular case. Nothing else.
Okay. Okay. So.
Yeah.
No, but you also, Shankar, you realize that a sponge in such laparotomies is exciting to everyone, including anesthesiologists, and they're very photogenic.
Okay. Anything in the chat box, sir?
There's plenty.
The other thing, Shankar,
Yes, sir.
permit me to say this. This is interesting thing that Dr. Kannan shared rightly about the person who is taking that gauze piece after some time after laparoscopic cholecystectomy. I mean, open cholecystectomy.
Okay.
I want to
Gautam, anything in chat box? Yeah, Kanan?
one more interesting incident I want to highlight here. That is compromising on the principles of surgery. One senior surgeon, he gave spinal anesthesia himself and did a cholecystoduodenostomy for a periampullary tumor.
Oh God.
Surgeon and the staff nurse, only 2 people in the theater. So surgeon himself gave spinal anesthesia, and then he did the cholecystogenostomy. In the bargain, he left behind a pad. So the patient came to us, our department, with a persistent discharge. We knew that something is wrong. So we opened and removed the pad. Patient settled down. That surgeon is talking about principles and safety of surgery even now.
Yes.
Actually, Shankar, one of the patients who had undergone a thyroidectomy, surprisingly, in one of the hospitals where I worked for a long time, and the patient has gone back to the native in northeastern India, thyroidectomy, and some pus coming and gauze came out. That they took a picture and put in the newspaper.
Okay. Yes, madam.
Dr. Shankar, what is the mechanism of permeation? Like, from post-hysterectomy, it goes up to the jejunum, adhesions in the jejunum.
Yes, madam. Actually,
how does it migrate like that?
no. I told you about 2 types of reactions, madam. One is foreign body produces profuse exudative fluid, which will, in which case it will present like an intra-abdominal abscess. You will find it out. In certain cases, it doesn't produce any kind of exudative reaction, but it produces only something like a fibrosis. And when the fibrosis occurs, the pad tends to make a transmural migration into the adjacent bowel, madam. It can make migration into the bowel. It can make migration into the urinary bladder. It can make migration into the vagina. All these things have been reported, madam. That's because.
How did the patient have adhesions around the jejunum in this patient, in this situation?
Yeah, this. I mean, the pad must have been left in the abdomen, and the pad must have migrated to the upper abdomen.
It's got later intervened.
And then it produces a reaction, and it enters the jejunum, and slowly it kept migrating intraluminally, and finally it came and get blocked in the ileum, because ileocecal, most of the things, they don't cross the ileocecal valve. But there are situations where directly it can erode into the colon, and as Kannan sir was telling, patients can actually pass out the pad through the stools. And
it happened, Shankar.
Just a doubt, this hysterectomy is, it will be,
Yes, sir,
it will not be intraperitoneal, no?
Intraperitoneal, madam. It's a transabdominal hysterectomy.
Transabdominal hysterectomy.
Any closing comments, sir?
Close after count again.
Okay.
What is that? Come again.
No, I said close after counting again.
Now, every time I operate, I do a laparotomy. I insist, the OT nurse, sister, please be careful. I don't want to be in that way. Every time I tell them, I want the nurse.
So finally,
Kanan, there are some surgeons, they'll hide one pad. And they'll make the nurses run around just to check that everything is in position. And all the exercises are done properly. And vicarious pleasure.
And I have heard about situations where sometimes staff nurses are very strong and they will all allow you to close without getting that pad. And there are occasions where you search and there will be a pad there. That's also
very smart nurses. They have saved us many times.
Yeah. Smart, the stars, they make a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's right. Radha, that kind of a mock drill you should do periodically to test the reliability of your staff.
Okay.
You hide your point somewhere and then ask the sisters. Yeah.
The worst thing can happen not for pad, for the gauze. Once it has not been found out, we search in and around the even operating table and on the floor also behind that OT table.
Yeah.
Enter surface of OT table also. People used to put some light and other things. We searched. There are so many things happened.
It's generally
Ashok
better
Kumar,
to...
what is your question? Ashok Kumar?
No, this is a problem leaving behind a small gauze piece during laparoscopy. Yeah. I remember once I had to resort to C-arm to locate and it had migrated elsewhere because we keep shifting the patient position.
Actually, there was one instant where it was in a workshop. Somebody was demonstrating a laparoscopic hysterectomy. They used a myoma screw to lift the uterus. So what happened was once the myoma screw got broken during surgery. And what happened was they didn't immediately remove the broken piece. The surgeon continued to do the hysterectomy. And that hysterectomy completed, but now when we search for the myoma screw, it was not there. So actually, it was a live workshop, and they really searched for a couple of hours. They were not able to find out the screw at all. And there was a lot of suggestions from the audience of different ways in which to find out, because the screw gets...
Anything to do with the screw, there'll obviously be suggestions, Shankar. Okay. C-arm wasn't there.
Yeah, it was not CM was not there.
Is there any questions, the audience? So I think quite an interesting case, and I think it's generated quite a bit of discussion. Shankar, shall I close?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.